You spent 2 decades administering higher education in this country. You were part of the Yashpal committee, which was looking at reforms in higher education. So, what really triggered this idea that you should now come up with a book?
Well, the book was fomenting in mind for a long time. I mean, it was almost 2 decades that this issue has been there. But let me answer that question through a small anecdote. So I went along with a couple of former students of mine to go and visit a local college here in Bangalore. And this is about 4 to 5 years ago. And this was a program which was for Bachelor of Vocation. This was a new degree that the government has introduced. These are kids who had done class 12th and were now doing a bachelor's program in commerce. But it was a bachelor's of vocation and not bachelor of commerce. And we walked into the classroom and we saw that the teacher was teaching fractions. So I sat through the entire 45-minute or 1 hour session and then went and asked the teacher and the students, but don't you think this fractions is something that every kid learns when we were in grade 6? And the kids uniformly said, we've forgotten. And I think it was that state of affairs and many instances of that particular kind for long periods which got me thinking about what's happening in higher education. I've also had the fortune of looking at some of our best institutions from within. And you could see phenomenal deficits there while there were strengths, of course. You also saw universities globally and universities within the country. And all of it got one to start to wonder, where is it that we are going wrong? Because the higher education system seems to be just falling off the cliff. Everybody seems to be dissatisfied. And it was that dissatisfaction which led me to start thinking. Also, I had time to go and write for a couple of years and then not do anything else.
So, you've been observing and you've also been making changes happen in the system wherever you were. You've run programs, you've run centers, you've run institutions. So, what do you see is the difference today in higher education in India if you were to compare that with the situation a decade ago?
Let me say what was the situation when we were in good shape versus now. And this is, if I start telling you about a generation ahead of mine, when I saw, my parents were both professors, and when I saw their colleagues coming on bicycles, but working 20 hours in a day, having students live in their homes, that was a world when I think everything was right with higher education. If I look at last 15 to 20 years, academics are slightly better off. There's hardly any encumbrance for many of them. There's hardly any time which is devoted. And I'm exaggerating a little bit. There are always exceptions in this. But our institutions and contributions are just not moving anywhere. And our regulations are far, far more stringent. I think it's probably the last bastion of control, higher education. And that's the phenomenal change that you're seeing. While industry has been liberalized, you see schools system being relatively far more liberalized. You see far more innovation happening in the school system. I think we don't find that in higher education. And then it has all its attendant implications. Everybody talks about things, but very rarely do we talk about what's happening in the classroom. What is happening to learning? And you ask people, you ask a professor, so do you think your students learned? And they'll say, yes, they learned. And when you ask them, well, what's the evidence? And they'll tell you that the evidence is that they all passed the exam. But that's not learning because we've been teaching to examinations and not teaching to learning. That effect has been phenomenally accentuated in last 10 to 12 years. That we are teaching to examinations, we are teaching to get a job, but we are not teaching to learning. And it has long-term implications as far as the country is concerned, as far as all of us.
So going forward, so if you were to now project into the future, we have seen a lot of legislation coming into reforming higher education. And if you were to now look at the trends, if you were to look at the challenges and concerns going forward, how do you see that scenario panning in the future?
So I don't have a I don't have a very beautiful picture to paint for you. If you look at an average college, you see classrooms broken and empty. You'll see kids hanging outside the campus. You'll see laboratories that are completely broken down. You'll see facilities which will not inspire any 17-year-old. And I don't think we are fundamentally changing the way higher education and learning should do. We're very siloed as far as learning is concerned in our institutions. And many times I wonder, why do we have universities at all? What is the purpose of having a multidisciplinary university when actually you don't step across boundaries of disciplines? Those of you who studied in multidisciplinary universities, remember your times. I mean, you've gone to study physics, but the next door building was sociology, and you could never take a course on sociology or music or history or engineering and technology. So what's the big deal? I mean, might as well break them up into 200 buildings. They're all located somewhere. And I don't see that changing. And I don't see any reform that is changing fundamentally the way we learn, the way we govern institutions, the way we enable institutions, the way we enable individuals. And I think if we continue going in this manner, better thing might be to just close many of our institutions down for 5 years.
So I know that now you had a private university, and I'm very sure, given your thoughts and your ideas and your experiences, you must have started a journey making new experiments, primarily to provide holistic education and to improve the quality of. Would you like to share some of your experiments with us?
Right. So, we realized 2 or 3 big challenges that academic institutions face. And I'm now merging a professor and an administrator and a regulator, all of them kind of put together. And one was that regulation prevents you from doing experimentation. The regulation today is believing in sarkari karan. So everything is standardized. All institutions must look alike. They must conduct examinations alike. They must reward faculty alike. They must have the same curriculum. They must teach exactly in the same manner, teach exactly the same number of hours, and so on and so forth. So we saw that as a very big challenge. The second challenge that we saw was, as I mentioned, this phenomenal silo in which learning was happening. And the third was this inability to engage a young 17-year-old's mind with the material and content of today, which throws so much of content and with which the kid is completely disengaged. We would interview faculty, interview young people and say, so what did you study last week? And they said, you know what, I don't remember. People have done a research paper and you ask them, so what was your last paper on? Let me look at the paper and tell you this. It's a sign of low motivation, low engagement with whatever one is doing. And the fourth thing that plagued our institution we're very low on research, impactful research. with which we are going to change this world. So we took these four things and we said, how can we completely redesign an academic institution? It's a very set of experiments that we are doing. We don't know how far we'll be able to go, whether we'll succeed or not. So the first thing that we did was we created a governance mechanism which brings in enormous amount of responsibility and autonomy to people who run institutions. And being a private institutions, we were able to secure that kind of autonomy vis-a-vis a government institution that's far more regulated and controlled by the government. So that's one thing, and we fortunately have in Ahmedabad University a board that is largely has the nose in and hands out, which helps you to do newer things without getting stalled and having to seek permission each time. Now that autonomy needs to flow down to everybody, from the executive leadership to faculty, to people who run career development, to people who run HR, to people who manage cafeteria, and so on and so forth. So one big experiment that we're doing is in really putting autonomy and ownership in hands of people who make decisions and push this decision making further down. The second is on interdisciplinarity. Now, most often our sense on interdisciplinary education has been that you're an engineering student, you got to take some courses in humanities, some in social sciences, some in arts, and some in visual design, and so on and so forth. And we felt that what was needed much more was a fusion of disciplines. So we started putting a new term, a semester called independent study period, where we started fusing disciplines. To give you an example, we had a course on sound in physics, which the physics majors would take. We opened it up as a course and transformed it as the science of building musical instruments, which is taken by everybody. Now, what it does is it provides enormous amount of engagement with a passion, but it still teaches you theory very differently. You still solve equations to find what is the right pitch and what is the right length of a musical instrument, and so on and so forth. But I can tell you that I've had kids who would come at 8 a.m. in the morning and stay at 10 in the night, working in the studio, trying to build things. So doing is learning became a very strong way in which you would push learning and bring theory into it. So, and we're doing many experiments on that count, I mean, bringing disciplines together, bringing, for instance, biology and costing. I mean, can you imagine why would a biologist want to learn cost accountancy? But it's so crucial for them to be able to see if you're developing a new diagnostic, you're developing a new kind of doing an experiment, to be able to find a way in which you can price it, cost it, get a sense of what a market for such a thing would be. So interdisciplinarity is one platform. The second is we felt there was too much of content. So we've taken a position of pedagogy over content. And it's a little bit wild, but and the traditionalists amongst us don't like it, because until unless you study 8 hours and study 400 pages of a book, you will not learn. And here we're saying no, pedagogy is very important, because beyond in a lecture where you are talking to a group of students, beyond the third row and after the 10th minute, it's all distant education anyways. The kid's mind wanders. Everybody is all over the place. They're looking left and right. They're acting, looking in your face as if they're very engaged, but you know they're not there. So what's the big deal of doing education in this particular manner? So we said, okay, let's completely start to experiment with different kinds of pedagogy. So the question is, how do you teach sciences? Why is there a separate theory session at one end, and then in the afternoon you go do practicals? All of us have done that, right? Why can't you teach theory in the lab? Why can't you teach, for instance, a thermodynamics class in an engineering school by looking at a big heat engine sink and then trying to do experiments with it? Why can't you teach sociology and learn Marx or Weber or Durkheim not in a classroom but in the context of a neighborhood? Where you go see what are relationships, what is power in politics, who decides, who leads, who thinks, who doesn't think, and then bring that experience into the classroom. Then you go read your Marx, and then you read your Weber, and you M.N. Srinivasan, whatever you have to do. I think that experiential learning and our early experiments outcome, we're at very early stages of doing this, is at least there is engagement. I don't know, we've not measured learning, but there's engagement. So that's a second big experiment that we're doing, and it's thank you very much. And the big, of course, pushback is from my tribe, which is faculty. Because everybody tells you, oh, my course it doesn't lend itself to experiential learning. My course on Indian short stories you can't do. My course on quantum mechanics you can't do. But we've now started to create some breakaways, and Partha, who's here, he and I, we went and visited some schools globally that are essentially doing experiments of this kind, and we're learning from them, putting workshops for our faculty, and that hopefully in times to come will take some roots. And the third is research, and we've kind of been very serious about it. In most of academia globally, your promotion, your ability to stay in an organization or not is dependent on your performance. But not in India. You have to be just a good citizen. You shouldn't abuse the director or vice chancellor, and you'll get confirmed. And you'll have now a tenure all your life. And that also happens after 2 years. So we again turned that on the head and taken some good practices globally. I mean, this is nothing rocket science that we are inventing. And we've put a long period of tenure, a 7 to 8 year tenure clock, after which we decide whether one stays in an organization or not. And then you enable the faculty with enormous amount of time to do research and to teach. So those are the new things that we're kind of doing. We're also doing another thing. We're putting together a new School of Arts and Sciences, and the entire world is telling us that you put your Faculty of Arts separate from Faculty of Science because these are two different knowledge systems. They have very different requirements, but we put all of them together. We have a single faculty. We have a physicist sitting next to a literature guy whose lab is next to that of a biologist who sits next to a philosopher, and so on and so forth. And the whole idea is that hopefully we'll be able to create conversations that will tell us slightly more than what we know otherwise about each other's discipline. Because problems in life or in the world never come as a problem of physics or problem of mechanical engineering. They come as a problem. Now it's up to you to use history, or you use literature, or you use common sense to solve that problem. At that juncture, nobody asks you whether you're an electronics engineer and can you solve this or not. And I think we are hoping to do experiments that bring these disciplines together.
Thank you. So, if you were to suggest some seminal changes which will really free the mind of a very curious, a very bright young mind, what would be some of the suggestions you would make to policymakers in this country if they have to bring universities into a very vibrant educational system?
So I think the good news is, we are really blessed with fabulous young people. Our 17, 18, 19-year-olds in the country, first and foremost, we have lots of them. And second, I think they are just absolutely wonderful. That's the good news. The bad news is, I think we should close down regulators. Because to enable this young 17-year-old You need to have a very different kind of a faculty, and you need to have very different kind of an institutional environment, and you need to have very different kind of regulation. Now, which unfortunately, given our current regulatory environment, it won't happen. So the easiest thing might be to close down the regulator. So if there is no regulator, nobody is telling you what to teach, how to teach, who to teach, how to admit, what to admit, then the likelihood is that there are better institutions in the country will experiment more, will run with their own ideas, will do newer things, and then enable this young people much more. So number one is, I think we have to get the government and regulation out of higher education. Very, very crucial. And until the time that it's going to be impossible for us to be able to do anything. Because the whole idea of academic institutions is autonomy, is academic freedom. To be able to say things that I want to say and not get persecuted. An academic institution is a safe place to experiment. It's a safe simulator. You come and do things and you fail, and that's fine. Except if you do the same thing outside in the society, it will be troublesome. You say things internally, you critique, you do all those things, and that's fine. But I think we have to allow creation of that kind of an environment. But for that to happen, you need phenomenal autonomy. And that autonomy institutions don't have today. And since you don't have autonomy, you can't make the institutions accountable. If I tell you that tomorrow you'll admit this kind of a kid, you'll teach them this, you'll teach them that, and at the end of the day, then what am I going to tell this person? Whether it's good or bad, I don't have any accountability measure to enforce. But if you give accountability, allow institutions to experiment, let 100 institutions all be different. Let them follow a very different curriculum. So long as the regulator frames a very broad framework of requirements, within that, how a mechanical engineering gets taught or how a physics gets taught, let that happen very differently in 2 or 3 different institutions. I think that would be, in my mind, the biggest change that would be required to bring changes on the ground level. A second possible thing is we don't have a consensus of what are principles of higher education. We don't know what kind of education do we want. Today, almost every parent wants their education to only provide employment. So long as it provides me employment, my kid employment, that's good enough. Howsoever bad that place be, howsoever strange and disconnected my child might be with the discipline, and that's why we choose a college over discipline. I'm ready to go to the best college with a discipline that I dislike. And I don't want to do the discipline that I want to desperately study in a college that others don't think is good enough. I think that change needs to happen very phenomenally. And it will only happen if we understand that the purpose of education is much, much wider than employment and livelihood is very important. But it also is important to create a good citizen. And that's why we're training our young people as technicians and who don't care about the world around us. And third, education also provides you with an opportunity for lifelong learning, a love for learning. Now, how do you do that in a very regulated environment? So that consensus in the society needs to be sought also.
So I've had the privilege of reading your book, and I must say that the book is like a page turner in a fiction, at least for somebody who's in the field of education. And one of the things which makes it so attractive is because you have used fantastic quotes. You have even used shairi. You have used lines from Sahir Ludhianvi, which says, "Jo baat tujh mein hai, teri tasveer mein nahi hai."
Yeah, this
So
is
so tell me, Professor, what inspired you to get all those quotes going?
No, I'm a fan of Sahir Ludhianvi. That's number one. But so I had to get in a court inside. But more importantly, this was in the context of online. They're fans of online. And I think online is very important kind of a medium of learning in times to come. And my critique of online was, जो बात तुझ में है तेरी तस्वीर में, and तुझ में means the classroom, because the classroom is much more lively place. It's a place where you co-create knowledge. It's a place where you learn from others, which you don't do online. And that was the context. But yeah, I mean, there are many in there which of that nature.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.